Today's edition of Mac Voices is supported by MacVoices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like Mac Voices, MacVoices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at macvoices.com/magazine or search for MacVoices Magazine on Flipboard. And by the Mac Voices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter to stay up to date on all the Mac Voices news. Subscribe from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Welcome to Mac Notables on Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. We have a whole lot to catch up on, folks, and we have a lot to catch up on with Mr. Ted Landau. Ted, it's great to see you, as always. We don't do it enough anymore. It's terrible.
I don't know if it's terrible, but we're trying to make up for it now.
Yeah, and it's important to note that now you have a new addition to the family who may or may not be making regular guest appearances on the show.
Yes, and my personal advisor and trainer, here he is, our new dog. He's a poodle mix of some sort. We're not quite sure.
Okay, and his name is?
Boomer.
Boomer. Okay,
yeah.
Well, welcome,
and
Boomer.
He does not want to look at you.
Well, it's okay. I can't blame him. I wouldn't want to look at me if I was in his place too. So
just gotta let him relax someplace else.
Yeah. So if we hear the occasional noise, we've been introduced to your cats before, but now we have a dog in the mix.
Yes, we have two cats. One second. We have two cats and a dog, and they all get along pretty well now, actually. So it took a while. We've had the dog now for about 3 months, and when we first arrived. There was a lot of chasing and hiding under the bed and screeching and howling and all that sort of stuff. But now they all either are friendly or they ignore each other, and they can be right next to each other and do nothing at all.
So who was doing the screeching, howling, and hiding under the bed? You or the dogs and cats?
No, we had one of our two cats, the white one, did not want to have anything to do with the dog. Our other cat, who is black, his name is Yoshi. He is so laid back. The minute the dog walked into the house, it was like, "Welcome, glad to have you aboard," and he could care less that he was a dog or anything like that. Miko took one look at him and then ran to the other room. And as soon as she started running, the dog started chasing after her. So we were off and running. It took about 2 months before that settled down.
Sounds like an exciting time in your household right now.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
So this has suddenly turned into pet voices. I don't know what happened.
It has nothing to do with anything Apple related.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some Apple related stuff because we have a lot to catch up on. I guess the first thing on everybody's mind in relation to you is, did you get a new iPhone 7? Did you get a Series 2 Apple Watch?
No and no.
Wow.
Yeah. And there goes somebody. No, the Apple Watch, I mean, they were both pretty easy decisions, I have to say. Excuse me, the dog wants to go someplace else. The dog heard somebody at the front door. The watch decision was pretty easy. There just was not enough new in the Apple Watch. Whoa. There just was not enough new in the Apple Watch for me to want to spend the money to get it. I mean, the GPS is nice and it's faster, the dual core, whatever, is nice. But really, I'm perfectly satisfied with the watch I have now, and I don't use it primarily as a fitness device. And a lot of the new features are geared towards that. And so, I was much more enthused actually by all the new changes in iOS 3 than I was about the new watch. iOS 3 was almost like giving me a new watch for free, because there are so many great new features. I love having the new dock instead of that friend circle that they had in the old way when you swipe like that. And the new notifications are great. And I was able to reply to a text message with dictation using the microphone. I couldn't do that before. I mean, you can just go on and on. There are just so many new. I think of all the new operating systems that Apple came out with this month, the Watch one is the one that will most change the way your device works. So.
Okay, that's good because I've had the same experience. I'm still waiting on a Series 2, but you're right. The new Watch OS does it. I'll be anxious to compare it now with my original Apple Watch versus a Series 2, the performance and everything, as to how much of a difference that makes. The actual hardware, since the software upgrade came first. But okay, why no iOS? Why no iPhone 7?
Well, that was a tougher one. One reason wasn't the primary reason, but one reason actually is the way prices of iPhones are structured now differently. It used to be when you had a 2-year contract that it seemed like you could get a new iPhone every 2 years almost for free. I mean, it really wasn't quite free, but in other words, you were going to pay a certain amount per month ad infinitum for your phone, which was kind of unfair anyway, because you were sort of like renting equipment from Comcast. You pay $7 a month for a modem from Comcast, and you do that, you can wind up paying $1,000 for your modem, even though it only cost $100. Well, it was the same thing with the iPhone. Your iPhone contract didn't get reduced when you paid off the cost of the iPhone; it just kept going, and that was bad. But the good part was I could get a new iPhone, say, that would normally cost $700-800 if I just got it as a piece of hardware, but I could get it. I'm continuing my 2-year contract for $200, say, or something like that. And so for $200, I would get a new iPhone every 2 years. But as I think we've talked about here, because I have 2 iPhones, one for my wife and one for myself, we would get a new one every 2 years, but it was staggered. So I was essentially getting a new iPhone every year, even though contract-wise it was only one every 2 years. And it worked beautifully. But now those 2-year contracts are largely gone. Now they have these programs where you're actually paying for the cost of the phone in installments, perhaps, or all at once. And so now I'm looking at, do I really, the iPhone that I wanted, now we can go back to a little bit, backtrack to the iPhone I wanted. I decided, once again, that the difference between, I have an iPhone 6S. Let's start with that. If I had an older iPhone, I'd probably upgrade to a 7. I mean, if I had an iPhone 5, for instance, I'd be jumping on getting the 7 right now. Even if I had an iPhone 6, I'd probably be looking at it. But with an iPhone 6S, the new things that the iPhone 7 does were just not enough for me to justify the cost. There were a few new things. It's faster, a lot faster apparently, which is kind of nice. But I haven't exactly been complaining about how slow my iPhone is. And it also had some features that I wasn't even sure I was going to really like. It has the new, Taptic Engine home button instead of a real home button, which had some pluses and minuses for me. It has the new Lightning port instead of a headphone jack. For plugging in headphones and such, and that I wasn't at all sure I was going to like. And in any case, I'd be happy to wait for a year to sort those things out. And there wasn't anything I was really getting excited about. And then the one that I would have gotten, if I got anyone at all, would have not been the iPhone 7, but the iPhone 7 Plus, which had its own disadvantages for me. As we've talked about before, I'm not a big fan of that size device. I like the smaller size better. But I would have gone for the iPhone 7 Plus this time, because if I was going to bother to get a new iPhone at all, I damn well wanted the new camera, because the absolute top of the list, number one complaint I have about my current iPhone is, as good a camera as it is, there are times when I don't want to take a picture with a 28mm lens. I want something else. I'd like some zoom capability. And the 56 lens, even though it really isn't a telephoto lens, it's more like a normal lens, but the ability to shift that lens makes a dramatic difference, as anyone trying them out would see. So I go for the 7 Plus. Well, the 7 Plus that I wanted was going to cost me close to $1,000. And I said, do I want to spend $1,000 just so I can get that camera lens? Especially when I already know, given the likely truth of the rumors, that the iPhone 8 next year is going to be so revamped that I'm going to want to get that one in any case. So do I want to spend $1,000 to get, for me, what would amount to a little more than getting a phone that's too large, that I don't really want, with a Lightning port for a headset plug that I'm not sure I want, with a Taptic Engine home button that I'm not sure that I want, and have it spend $1,000. And then on top of that, then I started reading, of course, that the 56mm lens didn't have the visual stabilization that I was looking forward to getting. That's only in the 28mm lens. So I started thinking, well, maybe next year the optical stabilization will be in both lenses. That'll be something new that they introduce. and on and on and on. Then the bottom line, when I just thought about it, I said, I can pass. I can keep the iPhone this year. And in fact, the pricing structure again helped me, because next year, Naomi and I will both be done with our payments for our phones. And so if I really wanted to, if the iPhone 8 was so spectacular, I could get an iPhone for each of us. I don't have to do this alternate year stuff anymore, because we're not under 2-year contracts that I have to worry about. So it all just conspired to make it seem not worth it to me.
I've been a little surprised at what appears to be, and we don't have any sales numbers from Apple now about the iPhone 7, but it's, from all reports and every indication, it seems like this was a pretty big upgrade year. I don't know if it's because people had been hanging on to the 5s, and it's just now it's time for them to move into the 7, or whether the new camera made that much of a difference. I don't know. I mean, there were so many dire predictions by all the analysts that there's not going to be anything here to entice people to upgrade, and then they had to shift gears because all of a sudden we have all these amazing sales projections coming out of the analysts, not Apple. Let's be clear about that. And then there's the little matter of the Note 7 catching fire.
Which, of course, I mean, they've gotten flack for that, but I keep, in my mind, Apple biased view of the world says that if it was iPhones that were catching fire, they'd be talking about Apple going out of business now. Samsung, and they just talk about, they'll move on, they'll get past it.
Yeah, yeah. Catching fire, I think, is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, but it's been a big deal. I don't want to minimize it. Yes, Samsung has had their share of headaches over that. No doubt about it. And again, I don't want to knock anybody that gets the iPhone 7. I think you're probably right. I think it was a significant update, even compared to the 6S. The speed difference alone will make a difference for some people. And the camera, even if you get the iPhone 7, not the Plus, the camera is significantly better than last year's camera. And again, not enough for me to want to bother with it, but better. And if you're dealing with a 6 instead of a 6S, even more so. I mean, I think anyone with an iPhone 6 or older, it's almost a no-brainer if you can afford it. The iPhone 7 is a worthwhile upgrade.
Yeah, I've been at a business conference for the last couple of days, and I was surprised at the number of people that had iPhone 5s, and obviously we were talking about the 7 asking questions, and I was shocked at how many people said, I really liked my 5, but it's so slow. It's like, wow, the last time I had my hands on an iPhone 5, I don't remember feeling that it was slow. It just, it's not as snappy as the 6, or I would hope or expect the 7, because my 7 is not here yet. But so there's this pent-up demand for speed in iPhone 5 owners that I think is contributing to things.
Yeah, I'm sure that's it.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to say one other,
Please.
before you possibly leave the iPhone 7 topic. One other thing I want to mention is the color. First of all, I want to say I'm thrilled that Apple has finally spent some attention on the black color, as opposed to the after watching gold come out and then rose gold come out and all these attention seemingly paid to the family of white iPhones. I never was a fan of white iPhone. I never was a fan of white. I mean, my feeling, I've never owned a white camera. I've never wanted a white rim around my television. I've never wanted white audio visual equipment. Never had a white video camera. I mean, black has been the default color for all that sort of stuff. I like it. It blends in more. And so I've always wanted a black iPhone. I think I like it better with the blending in of the screen when it's off, too, as I think we've talked about before. So, but Apple seemed to not really give much love to the black color. They had the space gray on the back, which I wasn't excited about, but was okay. And then the black. And now this year they came out with 2 new blacks, and they have a whole Johnny Ive video just on the jet black one. And so, finally some love. So I was glad to see that. And when I saw the video and watching the media event, my first thought was jet black. Yes, that's what I'm going to get. It just seems so cool. And a lot of chatter on Twitter and the internet was similar in that regard. And again, I think it's almost fortunate that I didn't pre-order an iPhone this time around, because undoubtedly I would have ordered the jet black. But when I finally went to the store to look at them, I realized very quickly that regardless of the love that jet black is getting, it wasn't what I wanted. First of all, the black one, as people have noted on the web, is pretty black. It's nothing like the space gray. It's a matte, true black finish, and much nicer than the old black finish that used to scratch so easily. And so you're basically making a choice. Do you want a flat, matte black finish, or do you want a high gloss black finish? And I have never been a big fan of high gloss finishes. I like them. I like the non-reflective finish much better. Even when I was looking at them in the store, the jet black finish was acting like a mirror, reflecting all sorts of stuff that was just annoying, and the matte one was just perfectly clean. And so it became clear, for my taste anyway, that I would wind up getting the regular black, matte black one, and even though the jet black seems to be the one that's in highest demand, it's not for me.
I agree with absolutely everything you just said. The white iPhones hold no interest for me. In fact, I tried one, I forget which 6 or 6S. I tried one for about 2 days, and it's like, this is not for me. I just don't care for it. The one thing, Ted, though, that because the jet black, I mean, a blacker black would be great, but I was a little surprised with all the love and attention that went into that video and Johnny Ive's narration and everything, that Apple brings out a jet black, not case, but a jet black iPhone, where they have to put in fine print that it may be subject to microabrasions. Mm-hmm. I know all the arguments, folks, about, I'm going to keep it in the case and all that, which sort of defeats the purpose. But at the end of the day, I would think one of the primary things I would want about my phone is to have it be as indestructible as possible. Mm-hmm. So that really surprised me.
Yeah, I guess for me it remains to be seen what they mean by it's a CYA, as we say, on Apple's part, I think, and I suspect it's not nearly as bad as the worst case that you might be imagining in your head as what Apple means. I think if it was really bad news, they wouldn't have come out with it. I think it'll be a little bit scratched. It won't look perfect. And for most people, that'll be okay. I mean, I have a car, the finish on the car after being on the road for 5 years doesn't look perfect either. But so what? I still enjoy driving the car, and it still looks very good, and I just ignore a few of those little scratches that's acquired. It's part of its patina, whatever. So I think my guess is, I haven't seen how it'll wind up looking. My guess is it'll be okay. But the other point that you're making, which I think is worth noting, is that almost everybody seems to put a case on their iPhone. In which case, which color you got becomes almost irrelevant, because if you put a case that covers the back of the iPhone, then the difference between a black and a jet black, I think the speaker grill is the only place you could see the difference between the two. So who cares which one you wind up getting at that point?
Except for the face of the phone that is not covered by your case. And
yeah, but isn't the face the same whichever black you get?
Yeah, whichever black, but I meant the white part.
Right, yeah. But if you're deciding between jet black and the regular black, which one you get is totally irrelevant if you're going to put a case over the back.
Yeah, exactly. And the case thing, I mean, I know there are a lot of reasons for cases. I was at the Genius Bar today, actually, and there was a lady getting her iPhone repaired because she dropped it, and she insisted. The Genius tried to maybe guide her gently toward, if you are prone to dropping these things, you might want to get just a little better protective case. And mm-hmm. she had this. I'm not going to go into too much detail because, with my luck, she'll listen to the show and find me. But she had this case that was, let's just say, coffee oriented, that mm-hmm. had a little design that had to do with coffee, and she mm-hmm. just had to have this case back on this phone that had just been fixed, that mm-hmm. provided little or no protection. And the Genius and I just kind of shook our heads and said, well, okay, that's what you want. That lack of practicality still fascinates me.
Yeah. Well, I kept my iPhone 6 and 6S naked until until I dropped it once and it broke the camera lens, or the coating, not really the lens itself, but it broke the sapphire cover on the camera lens.
Right.
And I realized that it would not have done that if I'd had a cover on it. And so I wound up getting the Apple charcoal, whatever cover. And in one sense, it's nicer because the cover is actually closer to black than the space gray of the phone itself. So it looks more like an all black phone now, and it protects the camera lens a little bit. And so I've made that compromise.
That's fair. So I know I made a trip to the Genius Bar, and I understand you made a trip to the Genius Bar recently too.
Yes. My wife's, Naomi, her iMac suddenly stopped working. One time we got all these weird messages about how every application on the device was no longer working. It would need, the force quit message came up on all of them. And so eventually I had to restart. And when I restarted, it wouldn't restart. It would shut down instead of restart. And I, of course, my first assumption was that this was a software problem of some sort. And so I set about to try to fix it. And nothing. I went into recovery mode, which I have to say Apple has pretty much nailed at this point. Recovery mode worked beautifully. I just held down the Command R key and it went right into recovery mode, and all the stuff that was supposed to be there was there, and it worked just as it said it would. And I went into disk utility and I tried to repair the drive. Now this is a 3 terabyte Fusion drive, by the way. I should say that. And not only that, is a 3 terabyte Fusion drive in which I had partitioned it, so that there was one main partition and then a much smaller second partition. And people might ask, well, why bother partitioning? I mean, part of it is I like the ability to have a separation. So, for instance, it's nice to know that if one of the partitions, like a startup partition, goes bad, that I still have the other partition that could be good. Especially if the bad problem is only a software problem. In fact, if I have startup setups on both partitions, I can then start up for the second partition and try to repair the first partition for that. I don't even have to go into recovery mode. It could also be a sort of semi-safe backup, where you can transfer files from one partition to the other, and now you have the same file in both partitions. And so if you're working on some critical thing, it can be a form of backup. It wouldn't survive a complete hard drive failure, obviously, but it could, if you accidentally delete a file or something like that, it'd be nice to have it. Hang on. And also, there's no way that my wife was going to ever need 3 terabytes of space. I was almost sorry I got that big a hard drive. And so I said, well, instead of having one 3 terabyte drive in which she's using 250 gigabytes and the rest of it is sitting empty or something like that, why not divide it up into 2 partitions and perhaps find some other use for the second partition? So that's my justification. Regardless, I had it set up that way, and nothing that I tried would fix the startup partition. The second partition, it said, was fine. And I actually was able to start up for the second partition, and again everything seemed fine. But the first partition, no go. And then I said, okay, fine. We had a backup of all her data on a separate external drive, so I said, let's just erase the whole thing and start over again. If it's a software problem, that should fix it. And that's when I discovered a couple of things. One is, the new version of disk utility, in my opinion, basically sucks. Apple should have never released it. Especially the way it works with partitions is just next to useless. In the old version, you could simply say erase all partitions and start completely over. There's no way to easily do that. In the new version, you have to use the erase command. The partition command really isn't used for erasing the whole drive anymore, the way it could in the old version of disk utility. And so then I wound up going into this, to make a long story long, which is what I'm doing here. I went into this business where I tried to then go to the partition and collect the minus button that's supposed to remove a partition. And I tried to remove a partition, and it just made things worse. It became clear there was no way that I could get the the computer to just go back to its single partition state. So at that point, I gave up and went to the Apple Genius Bar.
Ted, let me interrupt you with right quick. One point. When you're saying this version or the new version of Disk Utility, are you talking about the El Capitan version or the Sierra version?
No, the El Capitan and Sierra version are pretty much the same.
Okay.
The Sierra version actually looks, I haven't had a chance to look at it a lot, looks like it has some changes to the partition interface. It might actually be a little bit better than the El Capitan version. But there was this major change. I think it might have been with El Capitan or it might have been with Yosemite, I'm not sure anymore, but where they just totally redesigned the way Disk Utility worked. Okay. In a typical Apple fashion for some of these redesigns, it was a dumbing down. They tried to make it so it hid a lot of the complexity that might have been more apparent in the older version, and by so doing, made it harder and harder to do things that you might actually want to get done with a repair utility. Repair utility is kind of useless if you can't use it to repair things.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to have people clear on that. So
anyway, so I took it to the Genius Bar, and they ultimately diagnosed it as a dead SSD drive. The SSD component of the Fusion drive had actually died. And so they put a new one in. And then they gave it back to me and everything worked. Great. Except that wasn't the end of the story. I got it home and I decided that I was going to put a partition in, again, like I had before. I figured since that didn't seem to be the problem, I put a partition in and then be done. So I put the partition in. And then I discovered something that I should have known. I think someone with my experience would have known this, but I hadn't given it much thought until it was too late. If you look at the two partitions, one of them will say logical volume, and the other one will say physical volume. And it turns out that there's a reason for that. And the reason is that the logical volume is the volume that is tied to the SSD drive and actually forms the Fusion drive. The physical volume is the one that you added and does not talk to the SSD drive at all. It's just a separate physical one. In fact, Apple, in one of their documents, said that you can only add one partition to an SSD drive, to a Fusion drive. That Disk Utility allowed me to add more if I wanted to, but so I'm not sure whether that is an accurate statement or not. But I never tried. I only added the one, but I could see when I was testing things out that I could have added more than one if I wanted to. Anyway, I had wound up doing things backwards. That was the mistake. I had this huge partition here and a very small partition here, and the very small partition was the one that was talking to the SSD drive, and the very large partition was the one that wasn't. I had installed the system software, of course, in the large partition, and so essentially I had set up a startup disk that was never going to talk to the SSD drive and defeat the whole purpose of having a Fusion drive as a result. So I thought, oh crap, I did it all backwards. I hadn't realized the logical physical terminology distinction until this was all over and I started thinking about it. So I said, okay, no problem. I can just reverse it. So I'll just erase the partition, get it back to a single partition, which will then be the logical volume, and then create a small physical volume instead of the large physical volume. Do it correctly, in other words. And so I hit the minus button to delete the partition. It said it deleted, and then I got a spinning beach ball, which never went away for a half hour. And so at that point, I restarted the computer. And when it restarted, all the 2.5 or whatever it was gigabytes of space that large partition had occupied was gone. There was no. It just didn't show up in Disk Utility. It just said that I essentially said that I had a half a gigabyte drive installed in the Mac instead of a 3 gigabyte drive. And there was nothing that I could do. There was no command. There was no erase command. There was no partition command. There was no command that I could come up with that could force the computer to reformat, repartition, re-erase, whatever, in a way that could bring that stuff back. And so here I was again. And now I knew the SSD drive probably had not died again. I didn't think that was a problem. So I actually had to take it back to the Apple Store again, made another Genius appointment, took it back to the Apple Store again. They looked at it. And the guy on the counter said, oh, yeah, I think I can fix that. And turns out that the first thing he did to try to fix it was get out a special external USB drive and connect it to the iMac that ran an older version of OS 10 so that they could run the older version of Disk Utility. Exactly. He said, yeah, I couldn't do it with the. I said, doesn't that tell you something about the version of Disk Utility, that you have to use the old version to fix this? And he said, yeah. He didn't really want to talk about it. Anyway, then he had to, in a combination of that, he had to then go into terminal and issue disutil terminal commands to try to get it to work. And after working on it for a half hour, he still couldn't get it fixed. So now, whatever I had done, and all I had done, remember, was click a minus button to remove a partition in Disk Utility, and that's what caused all his problems. I couldn't figure out how to fix it. The Apple genius couldn't figure out how to fix it. So ultimately, he gave up in despair and said that I'd have to leave it there, and they'd have to take it to the workbench and see what was involved. And so I did, and fortunately, they called me up the next day and said they'd solved it. And it was a software fix. There was no hardware involved, but it required someone with more software skill than I or the person behind the counter had. And after working on it for a while, they were able to get everything back into a single partition again, and the 3 gigabytes had been recovered. And a couple of lessons I've learned from that. One is I'm not partitioning this drive right now. If the day comes when I absolutely need it to be partitioned, I'll worry about it. But for the moment, I'm not messing with partitions. That's number one. Number two is that Apple needs to take a look at, they don't seem to be in a hurry to do it, but Apple needs to take a look at how Disk Utility deals with all this stuff. They could use an updated version of Disk Utility. And the third thing is, I'm no longer quite so enthusiastic about Fusion drives. I mean, a lot of this headache would have been avoided if I simply had a straight SSD drive. And that's what I got in my own iMac a year later. I think I had gotten to the point where I figured that out. And I will never get another Fusion drive after all this.
I know when the Fusion drives came out, there was a lot of concern about, well, not necessarily partitioning, but just this kind of thing. What happens if one or the other goes south? Mm-hmm. So when it stopped working, Ted, and they put the new SSD drive in, I really haven't talked to anybody about this. Did you lose the material? Did you have to restore from backups, or?
Well, I had to restore from backups.
Okay, yeah. So you just basically when it went belly up, you lost everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that seems to happen faster with SSDs than with others. They always say it's on off. You know, it's either working or it's not. It's not like a spinning drive that will sometimes give you a little bit of warning. Mm-hmm. So. Okay, so just to recap, so you did not put a new, you put a new SSD in, but you did not have to put a new spinning drive in.
That's right, and part of what they do in terminal, I mean, there's supposedly a way that you can do this in Disk Utility, according to some of the things I've read, but I never saw the command appear that they were talking about, so I'm not quite sure. But basically, once you put the new SSD drive in, you have an SSD drive and a spinning hard drive, but you don't have a Fusion drive. And so part of the software magic is to tell the Mac to fuse them together again. And really, if you're going to have a Fusion drive and a Disk Utility, there should be ways of doing all that in Disk Utility that's more user-friendly. Because otherwise, anytime something goes wrong with a Fusion drive, I have to take it to the Genius store. I felt like walking in with my iMac and saying, "Yes, I'm using this for Apple Pay," like in the old commercial. I mean, why am I lugging in a 27-inch iMac is not a lot of fun, and I don't want to have to do it repeatedly. So, I think there's work that Apple could do there to make things better for sure.
Yeah, the Fusion drives, I mean, interestingly, I don't know about you, but I have not heard a lot of problems with them. They do seem to be an interesting little balance between needing more storage and price versus speed of boot up and speed of operations. So that's why I got one in the iMacs that I have. But on the other hand, SSDs are coming down significantly in price. Capacity is going up, so it may be time to rethink that strategy if you're buying a new iMac or getting something retrofitted.
Well, the Fusion drives, to be fair, work great when they're working. I mean, it's not like what Apple claims the sort of best of both worlds aspect of it is largely true. And so it's certainly faster than just having a spinning hard drive. But I wrote I think we must have talked about it on our previous podcast here, but last year when I got my um, uh, 2015 iMac, and I got it with a 500 gigabyte SSD drive. I wrote a whole article on my blog about why I decided to go that route instead of getting a Fusion drive. And I figured I was going to have to connect external drive anyway for backup purposes. It wasn't like I was going to be able to do everything without external drives. And so as long as I was getting involved in external drives, why not get the SSD drive, have some of the data on the external drive, and be done with it. And then especially when they said that the new SSD drive in the 2015 iMacs was like twice as fast as the SSD drive in the 2014 iMacs, and it was significantly faster than the Fusion drive. So I think that's the way to go. Yeah, and it's only going to get cheaper. Yeah, in a couple of years, I think I would say 5 years at most, probably less. Apple will retire the Fusion drive because SSD drives will have gotten sufficiently cheap that there'll be no point to them anymore.
And with things like Drobo and various external storage options, when you really need to store a lot of stuff, there are other options that offer a different kind of protection. But for your operating system and maybe some of your regularly used files, the speed of the SSD is just hard to beat.
Yeah. So that's good.
Ted, to wrap up, one thing that if we've talked about it, I'm sorry, I don't remember. Do you own an Amazon Echo?
Oh yes, we've talked about it.
I'm anxious to ask how you're using your Echo. What kind of things do you use it for?
I probably underuse it. I keep, part of the problem with the Echo is, not a problem with the Echo, part of the problem with me, the Echo is just fine, is that there are times that I would be able to effectively use the Echo that I don't think of until after that time has passed. So there's lots of situations when we're working in the kitchen, for instance, where we could ask it information about measurements and stuff like that, and timers. And we do use it for timers a lot. Timers are certainly a very popular use of the Echo in our house. I use it to check weather and stock prices. I have a news update. It will do the NPR tune-in news update. That sort of 5-minute thing that they do, and I'll ask for that a lot. I will ask it random. I've used it to check on movies that are in my area. I have a link to Spotify. I use it to play music. It's really, to me, probably that's the single most incredible thought about the Echo compared to what life was like 20 years ago, say, or probably even 10 years ago. That I can just walk into my house and speak into the air. Alexa, I don't want to say it too loud. Alexa, play such and such an album by the Beatles, whatever. Play Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. And it will just play it. I don't own it. It's not in my house. I didn't have to go looking for it. And it just comes out. And I can do that for literally almost any album ever made. I mean, it's just incredible. The ease, what's available, and the ease with which you can access it, compared to what was the case not very long ago.
Yeah, it's interesting that you would say that you underuse it. I feel like I underuse it too. I need to train myself a little more. Although what I use it for, I absolutely do love. Because it's that idea, and yeah, you're right. We have talked about this before. Because I just wish that the developers out there would give us more things that are truly useful. And I know that some of it has to do with the limitations of the device and the AI technology right now. But I don't really need to roll a couple dice or add 3 numbers or something. I really would rather have some of the power of Google channel into Alexa, but it'll come.
Yeah, I use it for shopping lists and to-do lists. That's another popular use I forgot to mention. Yeah. I mean, probably the biggest negative, and probably one of the reasons I underutilize it is that there's no easy way to get a catalog of what Alexa can do. Especially since, as you're, I'm sure, aware, since you have one, if you Alexa has 2 categories. There are sort of these main commands that you just say, Alexa, do this, and it does it. Then there are these skills which require that you remember some additional word where you have to say, like, Alexa, open the Jeopardy skill, because you want to play a game of Jeopardy or something like that. Well, if you don't remember what the word is, and some of them are not immediately obvious, then you can never get to the skill. And of course, if you don't, then in many cases, you don't even know that certain skills are available. I mean, they keep sending me emails about what new things Alexa can do each week, but I lose track of them. And so, it may be, here's an example. As I recall, there's a bartender skill that you can ask Alexa, how to mix any given drink. How do I make a Manhattan? It'll just tell you. But I'm not likely to, even though that sounds cool, I'm not likely to use Alexa for that. And even if I wanted to, I don't remember how to get it to do it. I have to go to the computer and look up what the name of the skill is that gets to me. And they need some way that Alexa can prompt you to access the things that are not immediately obvious that you even have them available.
And I would like to see them let us assign some of our own code words, so that if I say, and I'm going to be careful because the Amazon Echo in the other room will answer. So I'm going to say, hey, tomato. And that means something that I've when I say tomato, I want you to, do these three things, or read back to me something, or give me some information. Instead of, there's a lot to be said for the natural language commands, but I would love to see a developer somewhere give us a kit that would give us some of that. The skills are kind of part of that, because, as you said, you have to remember some additional words. But I'd like to have a little more control over that, and that goes for Siri too, actually.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about it, so I don't want to belabor it, but the big question that I often get when we talk about this, or when I talk about this with other people, is, well, can't Siri do all that? Why do you need Alexa? And I'm not going to go into it again because we talked about it, but I just will say it's different. It's different to have this always ready device that's in your room. It creates a different, more, I can't think of the word I want to say, but as good as Siri is right now, it never is always available the way Alexa is.
And you're right. I got to go down this just this far. Sorry, but we're back to the whole thing of privacy. That Siri isn't quite listening the same way that the Amazon Echo is, with all the microphones and everything. That there are certain things you have to do with Siri. Now, Siri clearly is listening more than she used to, because now with the iPhone sitting in front of me, I could say, hey Siri, and it's going to wake up and it's saying, what can I help you with?
And the other thing, I know, I apologize to regular listeners if I'm repeating myself, but the other issue with Siri is that Siri assumes you're going to look at the iPhone.
True.
So lots of times you'll ask something like the question, and Siri's response will be, here are some websites I found that might be the answer. Well, if you don't want to look at the iPhone, that's not very useful. Whereas Alexa only assumes an audio interface, and so it works better in those when that's what you want to deal with.
More evolving technology, Ted. I guess we're still doing what we always have done for years. We know how we want it to work, and that's not the way it works yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, what else is? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, the technology keeps moving forward. It's going to be driverless cars and drones and VR headsets and all. It keeps going.
Yeah. Anything else new or that we should cover before we wrap up?
I just would make a brief mention that I'm hoping before the end of the year that we actually see some new Macs. When I went into the Apple Store, I joked to the guy I was talking to. I looked on the wall, and every picture on the wall was iPhones and iPads and AirPods. And I said, "Don't you sell Macs anymore?" He said, "Yeah, they're on the table." And sure enough, they were. But many people, including us, I believe, have commented that it's been a long time since there's been some significant updates to the MacBook Pro line, even to the iMac line. The Mac Pro has never been updated since it was released. The Mac Mini hasn't seen a major update in a long time. Apple could give some attention to Macs, and there are, of course, rumors that at least new MacBook Pros are coming before the end of the year. I would hope that's the case, and I'd like to see much more than that, but that remains to be seen.
I'm right there with you. I'm not quite as incensed as some of our friends over the fact that there haven't been new Macs of any consequence. I guess I just feel like it will come when it's time, and when Apple feels like there's a big enough bump. And at this point, there have been more improvements to make faster to other devices. I'm sorry that the Macs are not keeping up the way a lot of folks think they should. Hopefully that will be resolved soon.
I hope so.
I hope you're back again soon. It's somehow a couple months got away from us. I think, once again, you were doing some traveling. I was busy. So here we are, and we'll still try to make it a monthly thing or so. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I would say that the biggest difference, I think, on my end is not exactly how busy I am, but that, as you know, I've sort of retired. These are post-retirement podcasts that we're doing. And being that I'm retired, it means that I'm not actively writing. And usually when we would get together, what we would talk about were the topics of the last 2 or 3 articles that I had written. Well, now I'm not doing that. And so I often feel like, well, I'm not sure what we're even going to talk about. And we usually wind up, like today, coming up with something that I hope your listeners will be interested in hearing. But it seems like it gets harder and harder sometimes, and that leads to then longer and longer stretches between podcasts. So that's where we are.
Well, if that's the case, I always value your opinion and your thoughts on things and why you're making your purchasing choices and what you think of certain developments. And I know a lot of other people out there do too, because they email me and tweet me and send me messages on Facebook. So you're far from done, Ted.
Okay. I'm still medium rare.
Okay, yeah. Well, go find the cat under the bed and enjoy Boomer, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, great. Good talking to you, as always.
As always.
Yeah.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Notables on Mac Voices. We hope you'll be back again soon. We've got lots more coming. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the Mac Voices blog, the Mac Voices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.